everybody, it's me, Laura, and today we're going to be doing some steampunk, and I'm breaking this subject matter down into elements. So we're going to start with the belts here, and we're going to have a lot of fun just trying to create some belts in polymer clay. So right away, I'm going to start doing a few belts, and they're going to be just, this is a sample kind of thing for you to kind of just build off of. And I may go back in later and do another segment on this, where I want to go ahead and add in more detail even to the belt element in steampunk. But for right now, I just want to show you how I'm going about and creating these things. So right away here, I'm starting out with a piece of scrap clay that was rolled out on a number 3 setting on my Atlas pasta machine. I'm bringing in my 2 needle tools, and I have 2 of them. One's got a little bit of a thicker needle, and then the other one's more for beading. Either way, both of them are really nice needles to work with and are really nice in creating pretty much my stitched line in my belts here. So I'm going to use the thicker one at first here, and then we'll go ahead and try the other one. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and using that thicker needle tool, I'm creating my stitch marks right down the side of this piece of scrap clay. Once I have this side done, I'll flip it around and I'll do the other side as well. This way it gives me that notion of a leather or a, not really leather, but a belt type of thing, or a stitched piece, if you will. And I'm using my blade to also kind of keep that line in, because I get really close to the one side on this piece of scrap clay, and sometimes I'm like, I put down my little stitch mark maybe a little too deep, and so the clay bulges out a little bit. So I just use that blade to help keep that clay in a nice straight line. So at this point, I decided, okay, I got my stitching down, and I decided to take my blade and actually cut this up into 4 different sections. And I did that because I wanted to go ahead and create little belt segments or samples for you guys to try and do yourself. You know, going into steampunk and trying to create some of these elements, you know, it's a little bit daunting, especially if you're like, okay, where do I even start? Some people will jump right in, but for me, I'm like going, I really want to break this down into its basic elements. So we're starting with the belts. Now, in this particular example, I have this log. I went ahead and I curled, you know, I rolled it out. I thought we're going to show just putting that stitched piece right over that little log, kind of giving you an idea of, like, say you have some other kind of, maybe you put piping or something, you know, as we get into other segments. This is a good example of how you might use that leather belt. Now, of course, I took another log here and tapered it on both ends. I am then placing this over the stitched piece of clay and tucking the ends of that tapered log into the stitched piece. I will then create another small, or I should say I will create a small teardrop here, and then I'm going to place that in the center of that stitched belt and hooking it over the tapered log. This is now creating our first belt buckle. Okay, so my second belt sample is going to be I'm taking a whole nother piece of polymer clay. I decided I need to show this technique, I really needed to. And we're taking a sponge here, and I'm taking the rough side of it. So, and I'm just patting this down on the clay. This is going to give you what they call a leather effect in polymer clay. And it really is different. When I went to go use the, eventually we're going to be coming into the paint section, it really does give you a different look. And I like it because it's, okay, this is totally different from if you have just a piece that's a smooth piece of polymer clay. And then right away after I got all my little padding down with all that texture going in, I'm taking my needle tool once more, and I'm going to go ahead and make that stitched on both sides. Once I got all of my little, you know, stitching put in, I realized, you know, from the camera view, you really don't see that effect of that texture. So I brought it up from the camera, and I wanted to show you what it would look like. And you could kind of tell right there when I brought in that other buckle and that other sample, it was very different from the piece I just made now. And in this second sample piece, I decided that I'm going to go ahead and place more than one belt buckle into this sample. I wanted to see what that would kind of look like. It's a very simple kind of change, but I thought let's go ahead and do that. So I'm adding in 2 belt buckles. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and add in, I'm going to take my knitting needle and start placing little dots for where those little openings are for the belt buckle. Now, or I should say belt buckles. Now, here's the other thing though too. When I put the teardrops down, the little fasteners to these belt buckles, I decided let's add in another little feature. And again, my knitting needle is going to go in and I'm going to put a little indent in each one. This way then I can go ahead and later place a few rhinestones into those indents. So in creating this particular example, this second sample, I decided to take one of my pieces that I had cut and I thought let's cut it in half. Okay, let's make this thinner and we'll just add in some more stitching on the one side. This way then I could take this separate little piece that I'm stitching up right here, I'm going to lift it up off my plate and then I'm just going to place it right over that piece that I had just done. And I'm just going to leave it just like that. These little pieces then give me that look of like it was meant to help hold down that particular belt piece because it wasn't quite secure. So just keep some of these things in mind. You could go ahead and overlap other little stitched areas onto your belt pieces. All right, so now we're going to create our third example in doing the belts. And this one is going to be where I'm stitching up on both sides, but I'm only going to go halfway. And the reasoning for that is eventually here, I'm going to go ahead and make a little log. We're going to create a little loop that's going to connect 2 pieces together. And when I create this little log, you're going to notice it's about 2.5 inches long. It is a little thin. I probably could have made it a little bit thicker, but we'll go with it. Anyways, I'm placing it over this piece, but eventually here I got to lift off the entire piece. And the reason for that is I'm going to flip it over, and on the side that I did not stitch, we're going to stitch up on the sides. All right, now that we have it stitched up halfway on both sides, I'm going to go ahead and I'm putting that log right in the center, and then I'm going to cut off just a piece of this. And then I'm going to take the other piece and just lightly roll it over onto the other one. And you'll notice then you have the stitching on both sides. So from here then I decided, okay, let's go ahead and make some fasteners. So I created 2 tiny little balls, and then I decided, you know what? I have this little set, and you can find them at the dollar store really. This little set of screwdrivers and flatheads, so cross and flatheads. And so from there I decided let's go ahead and bring that in, and I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of cross or a little flathead mark right on the top of those balls. I also then decided we got to try and take the other piece and loop it around so that it will connect in. On my fourth and final belt sample, I decided to take that leather effect on the clay and again create another little bit of a leather piece with the stitching and the holes right up the middle. The difference will come though when you're dealing with the straps that help secure it. And what I mean by that is in our sample number 2, what I had done is I had put those straps right over the top of our little belt buckle piece. The only problem was I thought, okay, I like that. It's fun. It's different. But let's go ahead and have one that's cut a little bit more flush with those smaller pieces. Okay, so in creating my belt samples, I was like trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do with these things? So eventually I couldn't help myself and I thought we got to just turn this into a little bit, if you will, not really a Zentangle, but a picture piece, okay? So I took a 4x4 square, just a template, a paper template I have here. And I'm just cutting this flush with my paper template. And then once I have this, I thought we're going to go ahead and take each of those belt samples that I had created and we'll put this on this piece. So for the rest of this segment, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch my hands talk as I try to place each of these belt samples I just created on my scrap polymer clay piece and create a small miniature picture. All right, so you guys know I love to go ahead and add little doodads in. I mean, I can't help it. It's just part of my nature. So I found some little metal pieces because I mean, this is steampunk, right? You got to put something in, right? So I found a weird hook that I had from my stuff. I had some screws, and then these little silver pieces, actually, I found them at my local craft store, and they're just brackets that I would place into the back of some kind of frame to help keep a picture piece in place. And so they turned out to be perfect for this little element right here. That second sample where I had the little belt pieces that go right over the main belt piece, it was perfect. I was like, oh my goodness, this works out great. So go and look around, see what kind of metal pieces you might have, and place this into, any kind of little belt type picture you are creating. At this point, I went ahead and I baked the entire piece. So I baked it at 275 for about 7 to 10 minutes. So you don't have to bake it real long. And then I'm taking all of my metal pieces up off of this piece of clay, because now we need to go in and, yes, this is all scrap clay. And you could use colored clays if you really want to, but it's so much more fun to take the metallics or my acrylic metallic paints into this. And I just found that it looks so much better. So right here, I need to prep my clay. And so I'm bringing in my black acrylic paint. This is just plain matte. And we're gonna start painting the entire piece in that black before we start to apply our metallic paints. All right, so for those of you who do know, I do have the Eccentric Egg Lady, which is my other channel, and right now I'm really into my colored pencil. And when it comes to the colored pencil, I like to swatch my pencils. And in that case, I decided, guess what? I need to do the same thing here with my metallic paints, because even though I buy them in the bottles, I'm like going, what the heck does this thing even look like? I mean, when you place it down on the surface, what does it look like? You really don't know until you go ahead and paint a piece. So I took some of my scrap clay here, baked it 275 for about 7 minutes. It's pretty thin. It's like on a number 4 setting. And number 4, number 6. Anyway, and then I just decided to go ahead and start taking some of my gold acrylic paints. These are folk art paints. This right here is my Inca. And I just thought we need to swatch out what each of these paints look like. So that's what I did here. I have like 4 golds here, and I have 4 silver, and I swatched all of those out. And then later on in this segment, I also swatched out a few of my browns and a little bit of bronze. So go ahead and enjoy this part, because this really does show you the difference of like what one gold might look like from another. I really hate it. They have it in the store. They show these paints, but they really don't show what the difference is. And just like my colored pencils, where you can see what the color looks like on the actual pencil, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it's going to look like when you apply it to paper. The same thing goes here. I really don't know what those paints look like until I swatch them. At this point, I decided that, okay, between my golds and my silvers, I had enough here to get started on the background. And so that's what we're really going to do here. We're going to start painting our background areas. And I wanted to go with a little bit of gold and some of my silver. Once I got my gold kind of all put in, at least on the background, I decided I'm going to go ahead and swatch out some of my browns and my bronzes, and that's what I'm doing here. Once I swatched my bronzes and my browns, I really looked at that, and the chocolate one, the darker brown, that was where the belt, that's the belt color. That's the one I decided I settled on. But I thought, let's go ahead and at least get the rest of the background painted first. I was real tempted. I wanted to like, let's just jump in and start doing the belts. No, let's get that background done first. So here I decided, and I settled on the gunmetal particular paint when I was doing this. I thought I could go with a really, a lighter kind of silver, but here's the problem. I had a really bright gold. I mean, that gold was really, really bright. And because it was so bright, I thought, no, we need to tone this down a little bit when it comes to the silver. So that's why I had settled on my gunmetal. Again, I kind of go towards that thing of contrast. Kind of like my polymer clays, I like to do the same thing here, even with my acrylic paints. Okay, at this point I decided to go ahead and start painting my belted area and start using that darker brown. And I really liked how it started to come about when I started applying that darker brown metallic. It was really nice. I wasn't sure when I bought that paint if I would really like it, but it surprised me. And so that's why I thought, let's definitely do this. Now, I am going to suggest that you guys go ahead and swatch out your paints when you go ahead and try and paint any kind of steampunk piece that you make. If you use a coarse colored clays, you're not going to have to deal with that. But in this case, definitely swatch out your paints. Find out what you have. It really is a nice way to figure out, okay, do I like that color or not like that color when you go to apply it in doing your steampunk. Now, in using that chocolate brown metallic, I decided I wanted to add another little feature to my belts, and that was using the taupe. I found I was like, I want to add a little bit of, a little detail in my paint job here, right? So I added that in with a few of the pieces and made a few of them like that lighter taupe metallic right in the center on a few of the pieces, kind of breaking up all of that dark brown. And really, to me, it was just what I needed. It made the whole piece just kind of come alive a little bit, especially because when you're adding in all of this, dark metallic brown, it's nice, but boy, it sure would be nice to break it up with another lighter color. And that's what I did here. At this point, I now have my background painted and my belts painted. The only thing left is to come in with my silver acrylic paints and paint the belt buckles and any other metal pieces or features I created in the clay. At this point too, you're also going to start to want to use more detailed brushes. So this is a much finer brush than what I had started with originally. When you're painting your background, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to details, you want to make sure you have a nice detail brush to work with. Also, when it comes to your paints, go ahead and play around with some of the silvers and even the bronzes or whatever that you have there, the golds. Play around with them and see if you like them better on your own belt buckles and stuff like that. So if you go ahead and create your own piece in the little belts, please play around with these paints and have some fun with them. Once your painted piece is all dried, go ahead and bring your metal pieces back in, and using a little bit of super glue, just place them back in where you had taken them out from. So these are the results I got in creating my piece with the belts. You'll notice here with the golds, I've got the darker to the lighter, the bronzes, and then the silver. And in the silver, the picture didn't turn out really great, but when you reflect that particular silver piece in the light, one was a little bit more blue toned and the other one was a little bit more red toned. So this is why I say definitely swatch your silvers or any of your metallic paints. It'll give you a better idea of what you're dealing with. In review, I do hope you guys will use this for study and reference. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I'm always wondering what you're thinking. Otherwise, I'm sending out my biggest hugs to each and every one of you, and I hope you have a fantastic day.